We got inspired this morning by so many different ideas, especially in the marketplace. Was so rich of different initiatives. Anybody wants to share one thing they've learned today?
Thank you very much. Maybe something I would like to say on gender equality. Because in the morning, I think that quite many people emphasize the importance of reducing gender inequalities in skills, in jobs. But what I would like to highlight is the necessity beyond strategies to address gender equality at the policy level. We had a presentation with key policy messages at the beginning, but no message on gender equality. And for me, it's really important to go beyond initiative, beyond good, of course, good practices, good, interesting, relevant initiative, but being able to really address gender equalities at the policy level and also within our respective institutions. So this is maybe something I just would like to share with everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. I think one more point. Yes.
So actually what I found most fascinating was that to address the same problem of youth unemployment, there were so many different ways to do it. And it was great to see the number of different organizations looking at whether it's through green jobs or whether it's by trying to address the curriculum needs. It was great to see how different organizations were addressing it.
Thank you. Point on the diversity.
And this is was so frustrating. As we got the revolution in Tunisia, and the challenges went from the economic challenges and youth employment to political challenges, and we had to deal with removing the old regime, having elections, having transparent and free elections in Tunisia, and the focus went from economic challenges to political challenges, and all the investment went to freedom of speech, freedom of press, and political freedoms, while the same problem is still there, which is youth unemployment and the lack of economic opportunity. And this is when our group, which is Youth Decides Group, worked to develop alternatives for youth multidimensional inclusion. And I'm here today to talk about We Code Land as our alternative for economic inclusion. I'm a computer science engineer, and I was when I was studying, I was working as a freelancer on global platforms like Odesk, which is called now Upwork, which are platforms that provide young people, or not even young people, the opportunity to have economic opportunities, the economic to have work on the global scale. I will give you an example to be more concrete. For example, if you know how to create logos or graphical charter for companies, you go through this platform and you can get a job. You can work for a company in any country, and you can get paid in dollars or in euros. So when I was a student, I used to work, I used to do things like that. And as an activist, I was like, what if I create an alternative, or I create a school, or I create a platform where I can give young people who are unemployed in Tunisia these trainings and these skills, so they can sell them online and get a decent job or get access to economic opportunities. And this is how it starts. It started when I wrote the We Code in 2014. And I tried it and had the proof of concept with 8 jobless youth in 2015. And it worked. These young people became freelancers, or they created their own digital job, or they got, thanks to the skills, to the new digital economy skills, access to an opportunity, a job opportunity, or they became even trainers in their local communities about digital jobs. So in 2015, we had the proof of concept, and the challenge was how to make it your location, you get access to these jobs, and this is how our goal because Tunisia is so young, but it's the oldest country in the African continent. So the challenge is how to offer the same solution we created for Tunisia to the whole continent, and how to serve and to be available to serve youth all over the continent. And actually, our solution is working pretty well. And we would like to partner with whoever wants to take it to another level too. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Wala Kasmi. For sharing your story. And now I invite the next, I'll take this from you, thank you. The next story will come from Solomon King from Fundibuts in Uganda. Welcome, Solomon. By the way, we will have the possibility to ask questions afterwards, once the 3 stories are through.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, everyone. Oh, that's much better. So to tell you my story, I need to go back a really, really long way. Picture a 5-year-old child in the dad's living room. How many of you remember VCR players? Yeah, some old people here, yeah? So picture a 5-year-old child in a sitting room with a VCR completely disassembled in front of him, and panicking, trying to fix this VCR because he could hear his dad's car hooting at the gate. Obviously, I did not succeed, and I got punished like a proper African child. I think you know what that means. But for me, that was typical of my childhood. I was a very curious child. I loved engineering. I loved technology. I was trying to understand how the world worked. And my dream, I had 3 dreams at varying stages. At one stage, I wanted to be a policeman because they had all the authority in the world. The next stage, I wanted to be a shopkeeper because they got all the money in the world. But ultimately, I wanted to be an engineer. I just wanted to be someone who created things, who invented things. So while my peers were making toy cars, I was making the same toy cars, but adding electronics to them, trying to bring it to life, trying to give it a little bit of dimension. But I was frustrated because there was nowhere that I could get resources and help and guidance and assistance, because I grew up in the 90s. There was no internet. When you wanted information, you walked to an actual library, you picked up a book and read the book. So there were no resources, and it was very frustrating. My father could not afford some of the things I needed. And so I was very excited about school because I heard that in secondary school, there were all these labs, chemistry, physics, and biology, and you could do all sorts of experiments. So when I joined high school, one of the first things I did was go to a lab, and it was amazing. Unfortunately, I discovered that school was designed to teach you enough to pass an examination. That you were put in front of a classroom, forced to memorize information, and then told to repeat that information so that you can pass to the next level. The science that I was excited about wasn't happening. One of my most painful moments, which was the tipping point of my change maker story, is me going to a library, finding a wonderful book called The Engineer in Wonderland, and falling in love with science afresh. It was this book about this lecturer who used to give physics experiments to kids in the UK during Christmas season. And so I got some topics from the book, and I went to my physics teacher very excited, and I said, "These amazing experiments, can we do this in class?" And he takes a look at the book and says, that's not relevant because it's not in the curriculum. So at that moment, it created a seed in me because I could see that this dream that I had of being an engineer was dying. And so I told myself, I'm going to make a lot of money. I was about 14, 15 at the time. It was very easy to think of making money back then. I told myself I was going to make a lot of money and then create a space where kids like me could thrive and be encouraged to pursue their dreams. I did not make a lot of money. I dropped out in my first semester of university. I discovered the internet. This was back when there were internet cafes, when, to access internet, you have to pay about a few dollars for 30 minutes as opposed to what we have now. And so I discovered the internet, and I found this wealth of information that was so amazingly powerful and so brilliant that it led me back to the dream that I had as a child. And so I began all sorts of things: robotics. I taught myself robotics, computer programming, web page design, etc. But because I dropped out of university, it was very difficult for me to get a job. I eventually found a job placement somewhere. But after a while, it wasn't satisfactory. And so I figured that I would start a business of my own. And so after a few really good businesses, after failing at a lot of businesses, I made a bit of money and I found this space. And then eventually I began going to schools, and I realized that I need to step a bit back. So when I learned about robotics, I started building robots in my house. All right, I had a spare room, I started building robots, and then I met a friend who told me, "Oh, I would like you to teach kids how to build robots." I went to schools and started teaching about robotics. And then I realized that the problem that I had as a child had become worse, because now the education system, which had originally failed to prepare people for education, was for employment, was even worse. And so people were studying science, but they were not being good scientists. They were not being good engineers. They were not being good skilled professionals. They were graduating, and there was no amount of experience. I'm sure you've all experienced this. You're interviewing a computer science student. He says he works on a project, but the reality is that he cannot handle any task and needs to be reskilled afresh. So Fundibots was born out of that realization that there was a very strong disconnect between what education meant and what the output was in terms of employment, in terms of skills. But it was also the right time for this dream that this 14-year-old me had. So I started Fundibots, and what Fundibots does basically is we work with schools and communities, and we teach kids how to build robots. And the idea behind this is that as a child is building robots, they're picking up a significant amount of skills which they are going to then use in their future employment. So it's relevant, practical, and purpose-based education. They learn about electronics, they learn about computer engineering, they learn how to code. If they don't know how to use a computer, they learn how to use a computer, then they learn how to code. So it's a very strong pipeline from education straight into the job employment world. Our primary focus has been in schools and community centers. We have worked with a total of about 6,000 students. We are in a network of about 90 schools. I say about because every single day the number keeps increasing because I have a kick-ass team. But currently what we're doing right now is preparing for even stronger job preparedness. So we are looking at the curriculum. We're not just teaching robotics now. We're basically saying, what is the government demanding that students learn in the classroom, and how do we create tools to help them learn that science better? So we're creating something called the Enhanced Science Curriculum. And through that, we are training science teachers, and we're giving them the tools that they need to prepare students in the classroom for the careers. So we are thinking both the deficiency in schools, but also the upcoming job markets in things like the fourth industrial revolution, which everyone keeps talking about. But one of the most frustrating things, I think, is that when you consider unemployment in many African countries, it is normally not from the lack of desire. It is just purely from a very complex series of circumstances which starts with education, all right? They say that Uganda has one of the highest entrepreneurship rates. That's because people are hustling to survive, right? It's not like proper business, but they're trying their best to provide. And so it's a very frustrating environment where the work that you have studied for, you cannot do because school has not prepared you for that. And so we're trying to create that intervention, and we're looking for scale partners, people who are interested in transforming education across the African continent, but we're also looking for people who are just as passionate about changing how Africans do work, but also how Africans get employed, and ultimately how we can transform our African youth into meaningful, practical, and relevant innovators and change makers. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Solomon, for also bringing me back into my childhood and the VCR. We have a third story now, and I invite Rotimi Olawale to join me here. And Rotimi has a business about coffee, which we will tell us about.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Yeah, good afternoon. Yeah, so I'm Rotimi Olawale, the founder and CEO of JR Farms Limited, registered in Nigeria and Rwanda. So before I go to my story, I just want to give a little bit of background of where I'm coming from. That's so that you know the kind of society I came out from. I'm from a society where people find it difficult transiting from the colleges, from school to the job market. When you're approaching your final year in school, it's like you're moving from fry pan to fire, because you're becoming bothered of what next after school. It's practically difficult to get jobs where I'm coming from. At least I can speak of Nigeria. And it's also difficult for you to start an entrepreneurship journey because there's a very large infrastructure deficit. For example, if you want to start maybe a barbering salon or maybe a small local business, there's no energy. So it's difficult for young people, whether you want to start as an entrepreneur or you want to go into the job market. It's extremely difficult for young people to move into the labor market where I'm coming from. So I'm saying this so that you know that my story, the success story I'm about to share, is not, it was not on a platter of gold. It was a difficult one to break through in the society. I won't bother you with all the figures. You know all the figures already about unemployment in Africa and all that. I came from a family of 5, a very poor family. My father was a bilingual secretary in the university, while my mom was a trader, or she is a trader. She's still trading. I'm just 29, and I read philosophy in school, philosophy of religions. But now a major player in the agri sector on the continent. In my first degree and my master's, I read philosophy of religions in the University of Ilorin in Nigeria. But while growing, because I'm from the Southwest and it's a farming zone in the country, I'm from Oyo State. While growing up in the secondary school, during holidays, I have this uncle of mine who has a cassava processing project. He was a truck driver. Along the line, had an accident and his leg got amputated. So he needed another business outside driving because obviously he can't drive anymore. So he started a cassava processing project. So every time we were on holiday, anyway, we didn't have so much money, so we had to work during holidays. So we went to his cassava factory to work. While we're spending the holiday, we work in the cassava factory. So from there, we made little money, we take back to school. That was in high school, myself and my siblings. So at this point, I was building my interest in agric because I saw how cassava came in, it was processed, and the market was moving. People were buying, every day people are eating. And cassava is a major staple in Nigeria, produced into Gary. Over 80 million households consume it on a daily basis in Nigeria. Currently, the national production is 7.2 million metric tons, and the annual demand is 12 million metric tons. So you can see there's a huge deficit for cassava Gari in Nigeria. As a matter of fact, we have importation of Gari from neighboring countries, from Cameroon, from Benin into Nigeria, to tell you how Nigerians, how crazy Nigerians are when it comes to Gary. Yeah, so also I have family friends then, who are piggery. So we often go to their pig farm to watch the pigs for them. So I was building my interest in agriculture. But one major challenge I don't have the capital to start. I don't even know where to start from. So when I left school in 2010, after my 1 year service, 2011, so 2012, I thought of how to start. The closest skill I have was writing. So I told myself I know how to write, I could put words together. So I started with advocacy. So I read about how agriculture created jobs in the 70s, how Nigeria was able to build infrastructures with agriculture, roads were built, universities were built from the proceeds of cocoa, from the proceeds of wheat, maize. So I was really inspired. So I started putting articles together and sending to blogs, guys, we have to go back to agriculture, we have to go back to farm, young people have to go back to farm, blah, blah, blah. And interestingly, as I was publishing on blogs, on national dailies, people started sending emails to me, professors, doctors. Oh, I read your article. Can you come for an interview? Can you come on radio? Can you come on TV? Discuss this topic? And say, oh, good. So I was encouraged by that. I was going on radio to talk about it, telling young people we have to go back to farm, even though I don't have a farm. Yeah. 111 farmers, put together the data, sent to the bank, but the funding never came. Meanwhile, I committed the integrity of my wife's family in the hometown. Like, guys, you have to, don't worry, you get the money. Yeah, so now I have to make it happen to save the integrity of my wife's family. Yeah, so so later on, I spoke to one of uncle who was in Netherlands. It's like, hey, you know what? I've committed a major blunder. I've gone to your village. I've put together farmers, and the funding is not coming. We have to help these guys. So he gave me some money. I said, okay, and my plan was just to give 1 or 2 farmers and get out of there. So I got the money, went back, gave it to the farmers, a couple of them. But along the line, I saw that I couldn't just get my eyes off it. I was following up, but the project failed. They took my money and never paid back. So I went back and looked at the module. I said, what's wrong? I looked at the module. I realized that I didn't actually follow the basic steps in the module I got from the bank. And what are the basic steps? You don't give them funds, cash. You give them inputs. They need cassava stem, you give them cassava stem. And you give them in stages. For example, if you have 100 hectares of cassava farm you want to plant 10 hectares this month, you give for 10 hectares. You don't give everything at once, because when you give them at once, some of them go to sell it because it's too bulky. You give them the fertilizers at once, they sell it. So you give them in stages. So I followed. So when I realized this error, and more also, I needed to work with the local chief, with like the small king in the village, who was meant to be the guarantor for all the farmers. So when I went back, the local chief said, okay, call a meeting of these farmers. He said, I called a meeting of 211 farmers. The local chief realized that only 93 of them were real farmers. So the rest of them were not farmers. And either they had shown me farms that didn't belong to them. So I was able to get the 93 genuine farmers. And then I spoke to this uncle of mine, my wife's uncle. Again, so now I've gotten the real farmers. I know you invested in my failure. Now you have to invest in my success. Yeah, so I was able to persuade him, and he gave me more money. So we launched, and it was successful at the second time. Majority of them do cassava, largely. A few of them do maize. Very few do vegetable. So when we started and it was successful, the next challenge was the market was very small, because the village is around one and a half hour to the city. So how do we move these commodities from the village to the city? The market in the village is very small. So we have to move on from just harvesting to processing. So at that point, I was able to raise some money, because the cooperatives that were able to get funds from the cooperatives, farmers taking inputs, paying back and all that. So, sorry, yeah. So I needed to start a Gary processing project, but I didn't have all the funds because I needed about 70,000 US dollars. So I went to someone in government. I said, you know what? Have you been seeing my post on social media about agric? He said, yes, I've been seeing it. You're doing a wonderful job. I said, yes. Now I need funds. I need to move up the ladder. This is the idea I have. And we're going to put the processing project right in the village. So the farmers are just bringing the cassava from the farm down to the processing project. And he said, fine, I can give you 80% of the money. I said, okay, good. We can raise 20% from the cooperative without stressing the cooperative. He said, good. So we started a partnership, going fine, selling. Okay, that was me supervising some of the farms. So it was going fine. Now I have my own fully owned cassava processing project in Oyo State. The first one was in Kwara State, so I moved to Oyo State now. Along the line, when the 2015 elections happened in Nigeria, the change in government, there were a lot of instabilities in the economy. Forex went up, a lot of issues in the economy, policies, changing policies. It affected a lot of businesses. At that point, I saw the need to move out of the country and look for other opportunities in other countries within Africa. So my first stop was in Ivory Coast, where I met a local partner, Kasmi. He's been working with farmers in Eastern Cote d'Ivoire, where I support farmers with inputs, just like what we were doing in Nigeria with the cassava farmers, and then we get cocoa off them, sell to the exporters. I said, okay, Kasmi, you've been doing this. I have some funds from my cooperative in Nigeria. We can expand and do this together. So we started working together. Until last year, we had a little bit of change in policies in Ivory Coast. That's a little bit challenging in the cocoa sector for small players like us, anyway. So along the line, I moved from that point to Rwanda because one of the challenges I also faced was that when I go out to conferences and they ask me, so young man, where are you from? Can I meet you? I say, yes, you can meet me. My name is so. What do you produce? I say, I produce Gary. They're like, oh, what's Gary? Then I have to start showing pictures, doing Google, see how they don't understand. So I needed a global commodity so that anywhere I go to, say, what do you produce? This is what I produce, and then everybody knows it. So I Googled, I researched, I was in between tea and coffee. Okay, so where do I do tea and coffee? Oh, East Africa, Kenya, Ethiopia, Rwanda. Okay, which amongst them is fairly stable for small players like me to start up and expand? Okay, Rwanda. So I went to Rwanda and were able to secure a partnership with Rwanda Farmers Coffee Company. We work with a network of over 4,000 coffee farmers in Rwanda. And what we do is very simple because I ensure that I mitigate my risk as much as possible because I have limited funds. I can't afford to waste the money. So I want to play in a place where my risk is extremely low. So Rwanda Farmers Coffee Company goes to the village, get the coffee from the farmers at the washing station, the best grade, specialty grade, bring it down to Kigali, we roast, we package, and we export. So this is what we have. This is exported to Nigeria regularly. It's exported. We've done export to US. We've done export to Canada. We're established in Ivory Coast gradually. We've done to Egypt once. So it's growing. And in December, we opened the first coffee shop in EcoBank head office in Lagos. So that's where we are now. Currently, we largely employ casual workers because in the agri value chain, you do more with casual workers because most of the time you're not working every day. So in the factory in Rwanda, we have when we have to work, we employ over 100 casual workers who come there to work on a daily basis. There's a documentary I shared with Luana, although it's not been broadcast today, but you can see it on Google. You see, visual representation of how the work goes in the factory, the number of people we employ, the casual workers, and how we've been able to impact create jobs on the continent.
Okay. I really hate to interrupt, but I'm getting signals here that we're running out of time.
Okay.
And we still want to give the opportunity for the audience to interact. There's still nothing coming in from online participants.
There are no questions, but many flowers for the different speakers about their great work.
Do you want to read out one of them for us?
Sure. Let me scroll up.
By the way, there was lots of suspense in your story, Rotimi. It was like, is he going to make it or not? The loan.
Great job, Solomon. Incredible what you're doing for these young people. Yeah, many compliments are also on Twitter. Maybe we can show the social media wall. If you haven't joined the conversation on Twitter, do so.
This is actually a very active page I'm seeing. Thanks a lot for this good job and with the social media. And Rotimi, we haven't given you a proper applause yet for your story, the story of determination. Stay with me. There may be some questions asked from the audience, also for Wala and for Solomon. Eva.
Yeah, thank you. I just have a very quick questions for Wala. She said she wants to scale up, or she's scaling up already her business digital economy in Libya. Just from my point of view, I think it's not the easiest. There will be other possibilities. Or why do you go to Libya? What is attracting you to Libya? Thank you.
Well, our challenge is opportunities.
Yeah, actually, I'll tell you how did it work. The employment minister of Libya, there were a German journalist who wrote about what we were doing in Tunisia, and he said that what we do can solve problems for Libyan youth too. So he put us in touch with the Libyan Minister of Labor, and he came to visit us, and he saw what we did, and he said, can you please replicate or scale your project in Libya? And what we did is, it was a pilot. It was a pilot in 2018 for 22 young digital transformers, and the plan is to reach hundreds of digital transformers and thousands of digital heroes. And what is so challenging and at the same time we are really so proud of what we did with Libya, because the outcome is just surprising. It may be like frightening to go and work with Libyan youth, especially because of security and security challenges mainly, and all the violent groups that are there. But it is so good to be successful on this. For example, one of our success stories is Intisar Al-Fasi, and she's from Sirte. This city was governed for 2 years by ISIS. It was very violent during 2 years, and she joined WeCode to create a solution for 3 years old and 4 years old kids, so that they don't stop getting education. They don't stop, even if they cannot go out and reach schools. They continue learning using digital platforms, digital mobile apps, and web. And this really makes us forget every challenge and every problem that we may have reaching out to this community.
Thank you.
Martin Fischler from Helvetas. My question also to Wala. You have thousands of digital transformers, heroes, and how do you call them? And for instance, if they get involved in creating, for instance, logos for companies, as you say, at the global level, it sounds all nice. My question is, in the end, does this, on an annual basis, provides for a living? I mean, you get 10, 20 dollars and so on. There are a lot of people working especially in the IT sector and in the programming and so on. They also exploit it. That is known, and they work a lot of, time and this, but is it enough to make a living in the end? Did you follow that up also with this impressive number of people you're talking?
Yeah, so the question is if it works and if it is enough to create, like creating a logo. You said it's for 10 or 20,000. It can go even to 1,000, but it's something that takes 1 hour maybe to do a logo, to create a logo for a company. It takes 1 hour, and let me like. $10 and $20, it's a lot, especially now. It's a lot. It means that a computer science engineer, when he starts, he can get 1,200 dinars, which is less than 400 euros. So, like using a computer and internet, it gives you access to an international labor market. So, wherever you are, like this, you think that these are few dollars, but it's really enough for like to make a living and to live very well in Tunisia first. And second, we are not necessarily talking about this small amount of money. And let me just give an example. You pay maybe $10 or $20 for Facebook to do sponsoring. But if it is a global scale and it's a global access, it makes Facebook a unicorn. Facebook is worth billions of dollars. It's
My question is, okay, what do you expect from us? Is there anything that we can do besides maybe staying out of the way?
You want to give this, and then Solomon, you.
Yes. So to your question, the one thing I'll tell young people is to invest heavily in knowledge, because the first challenge I faced was knowledge-based. And I see a lot of young entrepreneurs in Africa have similar challenge. I was invited to university to speak, and to just start my speaking engagement, I invited three students out of the audience, and I asked them, I said, what do you need to start a business? 3 of them said they needed funds. And I said, okay, if I give you $1 million now, what do you do? And they went blank. So you realize a lot of young people in Africa say, we need money to start a business, we need money to start this. But you give them the money, they go blank. They don't know what next to do. They get a car, they get a good flat, and then the next thing, the business is gone. So I will tell young people to invest in knowledge, because that's what's going to differentiate you. Even when you manage to start something, that's going to differentiate. And even if you're a job seeker, every employer is looking for solution providers, and you can only provide solution when you have the knowledge. So that's one key thing I'll say. Then to his question about what we need from development organizations. For me, I think more policies to influence policies on the continent, maybe through relationship with government, because that's part of the challenges I'm facing. My country, for example, is yet to sign the Free African Trade. That's Nigeria. It's affecting trade. Particularly, some countries victimize you in Africa when you go there for trade, and they hear you're Nigerian and know that your country is yet to sign the free trade agreement as a big player on the continent. So policy is one. Of course, it's also important for your solutions on the continent. Is important to engage young people who are success stories. Because I realize that most of the solutions within multilateral institutions, you don't engage success stories on the continent. And these are people who have first-hand information of the situation on ground on the continent. So it's important to bring young people on board who are success stories when you're formulating new ideas, new project interventions. ILO is doing that already on the continent. At least I'm privileged to be on board on a couple of things ILO is doing on the continent. We're in Senegal on Decent Jobs for Youth last November. A couple of developments coming up. So with this, we're able to suggest practical solutions, practical way forward, and we're able to dialogue and advise on the way forward. So it's very important to engage young people who are success stories, and more so, other young people out there are able to listen to us more, because we are both young people. We're all young people. So those are.
Let's hear from Solomon.
Just remind me the question again, because I've been thinking about so many steps down the road.
What is the one piece of advice that you'd give to
Yes.
So
Yes.
your situation is quite unique.
Yes.
But there's so many others seeking for a job. What advice would you give them?
So obviously, because my background is in education, I'm going to use education as a sort of guideline. So unfortunately, education in Africa is not good. There's no mincing words about that. Like the quality, the input versus the output is just not working. But many students are looking at that as a path towards this success, as a path towards getting this job, as a path towards this future. It's not working, but there's one aspect of it that's important. Every single organization, when they're doing a hiring process, they want to first see the degree before they begin looking at your skills. So what I tell young people, I say young, like I'm much older than them, but what I tell young people is go through the education system, even though it's not working for you. However, there's literally thousands of different ways that you can get the skills that you need before you graduate. For example, in computer science or STEM, there are so many online courses, there are so many opportunities you can get to learn, whether it's digital literacy or all sorts of things. But the goal basically is by the time you graduate, you have both the degree and you have the skills that are going to be needed once you enter the job market. That way you're not trying to get the skills after you realize that education is not working for you. So it's kind of complex. But what large organizations like the ILO can do, I think it's important to realize that some of the biggest impact is being done by people who are not on your radar. And these are people who are rooted in communities. They are probably indigenous people who do not have the kind of profile that you're looking at. And it's important to realize that their agency is what's going to truly transform these communities that you're working in. Unfortunately, because we are in conversations with organizations like UNICEF and the World Bank to scale our work, you have the potential to scale across an entire continent as opposed to just a country like a typical ministry would. So if you're able to provide resources to kind of what large multinational organizations consider too risky because it's just not big enough. If you're able to provide support to some of these more initiative, these more creative solutions to problems, I think it will go a long way towards solving this. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Solomon. Just want to read. You also want to answer? Okay.
Sure. So what you can do as a development agency, because I believe like development is part of your work, but at the same time you are supposed to be the problem solvers of all the challenges of the world. You can stick to entrepreneurs or social entrepreneurs or private sector or young people who are really creating solutions and give them a push to whether to scale up or to build a better alternative. For example, in my case, in 2015, when I got my proof of concept, it was so challenging to explain to development agencies and to funders that I created maybe a solution to solve youth unemployment in Tunisia. Like they really laughed at me, and some of them, they thought I was crazy because I was talking about solving unemployment using a computer and internet connection. And that was frustrating till the day I got the President Award for Social Innovation, Français Hollande in France. And people started looking differently on me and on what I was saying. I was no longer crazy, but it seems like this girl is talking about something, and it makes sense what she's saying. So let's get close to her and try to understand what she was doing. This really changed my life, and not only my life, because I'm here to create alternative or to serve young people. So it changed the situation for young people and the situation of digital economy in Tunisia. So maybe it could be a good thing to partner to find problem solvers. And you have Ashoka here. I mean, I know that you are a partner now with Ashoka, and they know exactly how to find people who are changing the world, and you can partner with them to take their initiatives to the next level. This is something you can do.
Thanks so much for the advice. I've seen Thomas is taking good notes there. I was just, before I thank you, I just wanted to see this tweet that somehow that got my attention. It says, wow, just absolutely mind blown at what I'm learning from Future of Work for Youth. Young people are changing the world now. Solomon King from Fundiboots shared how they are teaching robotics classes to young people. This is amazing. Africa has so much potential. This is not a family member of yours? Thank you, the three of you, for sharing your stories. We're so inspired. And we will see what we do of all this inspiration. But before that, I will invite my next speaker, and it's the keynote speech. It's Gilles Yabi. Merci de me rejoindre ici. We can thank you.
All right.
Gilles Yabi, welcome. Gilles Yabi est le fondateur et directeur de Wati, un think tank citoyen. Bienvenue, Gilles.
Merci beaucoup. Alors, comme vous l'aurez remarqué,
You'll have noticed I'll be speaking French. So maybe I'll give you just a couple of seconds to put your headphones on. I'm not just standing up for French. I think it's a good idea to have some diversity of languages. We are here in Geneva, in Switzerland, where French is spoken, and so that's also why I wanted to speak French. If I could begin by thanking the organizers, the Swiss Agency for Development Cooperation and the ILO for inviting me, and for having invited Wati, which is my people's think tank from West Africa. Hopefully I'll have time to explain what that is in due course, but I want to begin by trying to find something new to say, following all of the wonderful speakers we've had already today, talking about the employment situation in Africa and the challenges in particular that we face. I've heard some very exciting stories from very active people, 3 people in particular who have shown how young people on the continent are rising to these challenges and taking their future in their own hands and trying to change things in Africa. An economist would look at things from an economist's perspective, put all of these labor issues in a more general context. We need to create employment on the continent and see that from the wider perspective. If you look at the economy as a whole, to create jobs, what you need is for the economies of the region to progress and create and add more value. I don't want to repeat much of what has already been said in terms of facts on the figures that you've heard about the employment situation in Africa. But I would just recall a couple of key figures on employment and demographics. Talking about employment in Africa and the future of employment, you also need to talk about the demographic growth of the continent and the enormous number of young people. In 2010, 63% of the population in Africa was under the age of 25. 60%, that was in 2010. The workforce will increase by 40% in Africa by 2030. And that's not far away. We're already in 2019, after all. So that 40% growth in the workforce will come in the next 11 to 12 years. And if current trends continue, only half of the newcomers to the employment market will find a job. And the majority of those jobs will be in the informal sector. The African population of working age full stop for all of those youngsters. So the current growth rate of workforce, Africa will have to create about 12 million new jobs every year to prevent an increase in unemployment. 12 million jobs a year. So I'm from Dakar in Senegal. I'm from Benin originally, and I work all over Western Africa. And the challenges, the demographic and jobs-related challenges apply to the whole of Africa, as we've seen over the course of this morning. But in the region I know best, West Africa, we have the most populated country on the continent. We heard from our friend from Nigeria as well, and other colleagues from Nigeria. And I'll come back to the very interesting case of the agency, the USAID initiatives in Nigeria. But if you look at West Africa and Nigeria in particular, you see the importance of figures and statistics and the enormous challenges that are faced. In West Africa, we also have a region where there are many of the poorest countries in terms of per capita GDP in Africa and the world, in the Sahel countries. We've heard a lot about the situation there, Niger, Mali, etc. And those are countries characterized by the highest demographic growth rate, not only in Africa but in the world. And so we have a situation with swiftly growing population, low income, and growing levels of insecurity in those countries. The challenges and the fact that there are many young people now, and that we have a fast growing population. Young people are the continent's biggest strength, and we've heard that this morning. So having heard from all of the very positive stories, I certainly don't want to be too pessimistic about the challenges of the jobs market. Young people are the continent's biggest strength. And in many other regions around the world, we see aging populations with different concerns. And that gives rise to in those countries, particularly here in Europe, for instance. So the fact that we have many young people is our strength. But the number of young people will double in Africa by 2050. And I asked last year a friend from Nigeria for a text, and he said, potential is nothing. And I thought that was a very interesting thing to say. It was a very interesting title for that paper, because for many decades now, since the independence of many African nations, we've been talking about the tremendous potential of these countries, but a potential that isn't realized is worthless. So it's true that our young people are our strength, but we also need to address the challenge and start talking about the potential and start talking about real progress. The situation today, as we've heard from the African Development Bank in the 2015 study on jobs for youth in Africa, is the following. Some 420 million young people between the ages of 15 and 35. A third of them were unemployed and losing hope. Another third were vulnerable, precarious employment, and just one third had waged labor. That was in 2015. So it's very important to think about the future and face up to the reality, which is also quite a worrying one, and that is that a third of our young people are unemployed and and have lost hope in the future. The reality is also the low level of stable salaried work in Africa.
Je crois que c'est important de le rappeler.
And it's important to remind ourselves that it's better to see growth in a country than stagnation or economic recession. That goes without saying. Economic growth generally is good for jobs. But obviously it's not enough to create enough jobs for the young people that we have. And that's a vital thing to take into account as well. When you talk about jobs, future in Africa, you need to make that link between the progress, the growth of the African economy and job creation, per se. Economic growth reflects the creation of wealth in economy, but the growth rate won't tell you anything about the origins of that growth and the mechanisms behind it, more about the effect on employment, income and distribution, and overcoming inequalities. So the growth rate in the economy just talks about the creation of wealth, but it doesn't tell you anything more. You can have two countries with an equal growth rate, but with very different types of growth and very different impacts on jobs. So according to the African Development Bank, African countries are among the most dynamic emerging economies in the world. A country like Côte d'Ivoire in West Africa, Senegal have growth rates beyond above 5% for many years now, which is very impressive, is often referred to. So that do not go with job creation. So the main link between job growth and between economic growth and job creation is the structure of the economy. So you need to look not only at the growth rates, but the sectors that are generating that growth. Some sectors have a greater impact on job creation in the economy. The African Development Bank and UNDP and the OECD have been publishing economic prospects for Africa for some years now. In 2019, the report just came out 3 weeks ago, and it has a chapter on employment and on the growth of companies, which I found very interesting. What that study shows is it confirms that economic growth is very impressive in Africa, but it hasn't led to a creation of jobs. 1% increase in the GDP between 2000 and 2014 was only associated with a 0.41% increase in the number of jobs. So that's less than 1% per year, which is far less than the average growth rate of 3% of the active population. So we know this. We know that there are high growth rates, but there isn't the job creation that should go with that. So if that continues, 100 million people will become unemployed in Africa between now and 2030. And in the absence of any structural, significant structural change, most jobs created will be most probably in the informal sector, where wages and productivity is low and employment extremely vulnerable. And we might see a significant increase in extreme poverty between now and 2030. Now moving to my next point on the informal economy, and I'll try and be as brief as I can because a lot has already been said about that. It's important to remember that when you talk about employment in Africa, economics generally, the formal economy is actually an exception. Most people live off the informal economy, And you shouldn't be too negative about that. That's just the way it is. And the issue is, how do we bring more and more jobs into the formal sector to ensure that jobs are more secure, to unleash the potential of all of these people who work in the informal economy? You need to be realistic. And of course, this isn't going to change miraculously over the next few years. And so I think we need to recognize that the informal economy will continue to be the mainstay of the African economy. I don't want to speak for too long about that, but I would like to make the following point about industry, which I think is very important. This recent African Development Bank report also shows that the phases of accelerating economic growth in African economies for the past decade or so have no longer been associated with the development of industry. I mean, the study confirms that the impact on jobs is only significant if economic growth is associated with industry and manufacturing in particular. So growth periods are triggered by services-related industry or mining do not tend to lead to a structural transformation of economies. Now, we knew that, and we recognized that industrialization led to an increase in jobs. But the bad news is that we don't see a lot of industrialization today. In fact, we see disindustrialization in many countries around the continent. From Benin, I'm from Benin, and I know we're a small country, but we had agricultural processing industries which have disappeared recently. Only some are coming back, and in the north of Nigeria, you had car manufacturing just a few years ago, and that's totally disappeared. So the situation in north of Nigeria today is very much linked to the fact that much of this industry has collapsed. So you can't talk about the future of employment in Africa without referring to the need not to abandon this problem of industrialization. You can't imagine you're going to create jobs without seeing industrialization. I think when you talk about industrialization and the need for job creation, we need to talk about the creation of local jobs. You need to produce more and more locally. So when you produce locally, you produce for the domestic market, the national market, or for the international market. But you need to produce locally. That is key. And in my view, you can't talk about employment in Africa in the years to come without recognizing today that people mainly consume imported goods, even for day-to-day needs. A major challenge we face for employment in Africa is the challenge of production, and we need to consume more local and regional goods and services. Talk about clothing, for example, something very specific. There's a mini trade war between Rwanda and the United States now on cheap clothing. If you go into the countryside in West Africa, you will see people wearing second-hand clothes imported from Europe or the United States. And Rwanda tried to multiply times by 5 the tariffs on the imports of those second-hand clothes. And you had a very strong lobby in the United States that put considerable pressure on the American government to force Rwanda to take those tariffs away, and Rwanda refused. And many major powers, we have to recognize, fight for the legitimate interests of their citizens in key sectors. And here, quite clearly, is a sector where this problem needs to be addressed. Clothing and food are key sectors in terms of day-to-day needs. And if we can produce more goods to satisfy the day-to-day needs of our populations in clothing and food, then we might be in a position to create more jobs. A few months ago, I wrote about babies' nappies in an article. There are millions of babies in Africa, and will be millions more over the next few years. There's an enormous market for babies' nappies, but we hardly produce any in Africa. So China, Turkey, and other countries are benefiting from the market. So just looking at West Africa, I dream of the day when we will be able to produce day-to-day items such as babies' nappies and make the most of the fact that we have so many young people on the continent. I have a great deal more I could say, but I think I need to conclude and give some time to answer some questions. But I finish by saying that you talk about jobs in Africa without talking about all of the necessary conditions that need to be in place to ensure a transformation of our economies. And I think the top priority is a political transformation. Look at the initiative of the governor in Nigeria, who said that the role of states is key. If there are no government initiatives taken in the public interest, then I just don't think we are going to see the industrial policies in place to lead to job creation and lead to the educational changes that we need to see. So the first conclusion I would draw is that we need to see a political transformation, so that the relationship between our governments and our people are radically different. Secondly, we need to see a transformation of education systems and training systems. Our education systems are failed in the majority of African countries. I would say we need to see an educational revolution. We need to see a new vision for the education that we want to see in African future. Otherwise, we will not have the educated people that we need to see capable of creating jobs for them and for others. So we need to see a political and economic transformation, and indeed a cultural transformation. Transformation in that relationship between people and their jobs, a whole new paradigm shift in terms of values. So I think we need to look at this very broadly. And the issue is how to go about doing this. Finally, if I could just conclude with that, I think states have a very important role to play, but civil society as well needs to be far more informed, active, participating in all of these discussions so that we can rise to these key challenges. And that's one of the things that we're trying to do in our think tank WATI. Thank you for your attention.
Merci Gilles.
Thank you, Gilles.
Garde encore le.
Just keep the mic.
Have the chance maybe for one or two questions after this very lucid analysis on employment in Africa. Any reactions, questions? Please.
Bonjour.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for your presentation. It was very inspiring. I think I'm young, like everyone here this afternoon. I'm also very concerned by what's happening in Africa today, and indeed what will happen in the next few years. And when you talked about industrialization and the free trade agreement that you referred to, what are the main challenges that you think countries will face in ensuring that jobs are created in Africa so that we can help our young people find the future? Okay, can we just take one more question?
Yes.
I'm from the World Agroforestry Center, and I wanted to ask you how you see agriculture as a place for young people. And I've heard that a study showed that there are 19 jobs from farm to fork for young people in Africa. Yeah, so la fourchette, à la fourchette. Il y a beaucoup de choses qu'on peut faire pour le transport, processing, tout ça. Moi, je suis avec les arbres et l'agriculture.
I work in forestry and agriculture myself. So perhaps some very brief replies on free trade and the challenges that countries face in that context, and the opportunities in agriculture. Well, on the first question about the free trade agreement, free trade is all very well, and trade is all very well, in particular within African countries, and that's why we have that free trade agreement. But to trade, you also need to produce, and that is the challenge that we face. I think the issue is incentives. What I didn't have time to talk about is that there's a real problem in terms of the incentives that are available. It's much easier to make money today by trading or selling. It's much quicker and less risky. It's so easy. It's more profitable than to launch a processing industry, for instance. Milk processing, for instance, in Senegal was a wonderful initiative recently that was launched, producing yogurt from coconut milk, and this is a tremendous project that can transform people's lives in the region, but it needs 5 to 10 years before it can become profitable. So you don't have a system that creates incentives for production, then you won't be able to transform the economy or the lives of the people. People will just be interested in buying and selling, buying from China, buying from Turkey, and then selling, because that's the way to make a quick buck. And that's not what we need if we're going to create millions of jobs. So the agreement is all very well, but first of all, you need to create the conditions so that you have people who produce. And then the issue about agriculture, I also thought it was very interesting to listen to Rotimi earlier, because the agricultural sector is key. In Nigeria, if agriculture hadn't been revitalized over the past few years with the oil crisis, the country was in a recession, so the sector that got them out of that recession was agriculture. So it is a tremendous source of employment, potentially, and it's a very good thing to see young people now going back to agriculture, seeing that they can make money from that sector. And that's what's happened in Nigeria and Côte d'Ivoire, and I think it's something that should be supported. I think we need to get back to basics. We need to produce, to provide food for our people, and to provide clothes for our people. Let's get specific, and we know that we're in a very difficult, challenging world, so you need to be very smart about it. You have to find the niches for developing industry without threatening the powerful.
Unfortunately, time is flying. We could go on for a long time, obviously, but we still want to make something out of this conference. Some news before we head to the next session, some news from the online community. Cesar.
So, some very good news for all of you who think we're in this room. These are some walls that are containing all this knowledge. We are doing some tweets. If you just look at the screen, with the tweets we did, everyone here and people online, we've reached more than 1 million users that have seen our posts. That means 2,500,000 by now, half an hour after I did this, 2,599,000 right now. Impressions, that means the number of times that this post have been seen by users around the world. So for you, those of you that are skeptical, these are facts. It's really happening. Reach is happening there. If you ever think that technology is is there, but you don't know how to use it, just think of these numbers and think that it can really make a difference in outreach. So thank you for joining. This is not done, so keep posting, and thank you.
Thank you, Cesar. I'm absolutely impressed. 2.5 million people have seen these posts. No, and it's not something to be taken for granted. Obviously, there's lots of work behind there. No, we have 2 additional resources who are working on this, but it's possible, and we have the skills and the technology to do this now. Okay, we've seen this morning, we've been inspired by different theories and policies that are going on. We've seen good practices during the marketplace. We've heard examples and success stories of young Africans. We've heard a very sound analysis now by Giliabi. Now, what do we do out of all this? And this brings us to the next session. We want to use these, I don't know, maybe 80 plus all the online participants, brains that we still have here to make something out of this community. And I'll just ask, the next format is the World Café. So I'll just ask all the volunteers, table hosts to quickly stand up. And while I'll be explaining this next session, you can already head, Luana will take you upstairs so you can already install yourself at the different tables. And we will try to answer a few questions that I will not anticipate now. But what you have to do is we go upstairs, again where the marketplace was, and you distribute yourself in the 7 tables that are there. After 25 minutes, I will give us some sign, and please be disciplined there because I don't have a microphone. So I will try to get your attention, and the table hosts have also been briefed and asked to be collaborative. We just have to interrupt after 25 minutes. We interrupt the discussions we have, and you change and you go to any other table. After another 25 minutes, the same. We interrupt the discussions. You go to a 3rd table that you have not yet been to, and you will get instruction on what to do at that moment. And then we will meet again at 4:45. We will meet again here in the plenary to discuss the results of what we do with all this collective intelligence on how to bring this community forward. Any questions on this format? Been super clear then? I'll see you upstairs.
We are in the World Café now. I don't know whether you're familiar with this, but I think Andrea already explained it to us. So they are now in the different rooms upstairs, and they will switch the tables. They have 3 different tables, and each table will discuss one question. And after 25 minutes, they will change to a next table. So it's very interactive, and people will brainstorm during 25 minutes on one question, and then they would change, and they will join another group and discuss the question there. Here, with the online community, we stay in the same group, obviously. So every one of you that is now connected with us here, I see about 20 people online, so it's great that you are all here. I'm very excited that you will join this discussion, and we will just stick together for the whole time, but we will try to also have different time slots for each question. So we have the same questions than the guys above us upstairs. These are the ones that I already posted, and you see them. You should see them now on the slide next on the left side. I think you've seen we've come up with 3 very good recommendations. I think we nailed it.
There's no prize for the best recommendations, but still.
No, it was a very engaged group, and I'm very happy that people were still this late in the afternoon. And through the online community, it's not that easy, only typing and not being able to speak up. So they did a great job. Thanks.
Well done. And the same goes for, and the same also for the physical crowd that we have here. It's not something we take for granted. Everyone is still here at this time of the day, especially those who came from far. Let's have a look at these recommendations, these next steps. So Fabio will slowly scroll down as we read through them. The first one is support, build, and fund alternate spaces for education, exposure, and experimentation outside the traditional and the bureaucracy. Find models like Ashoka, which identify high potential and build their profile. Political dialogue and invest in digital literacy. Change the education sector. Interactive learning to empower youth. Private sector demand-based formation. Flexible learning to address gender barriers. More youth at the table. At which table? This table? I don't know whether to take this as a compliment. ILO promotes its model of fair partnership between government workers and business globally. Use its experience and success as a model. Concerted effort beyond silos, involving different stakeholders from grassroots level and youth associations, to private sector to international organizations. Keep on influencing policies for international trade. So much to do. Formalize some informal sector like artisanal mining, for example. Spend more time on seeing Africa's potential as its own biggest internal market and figuring out how to promote this. Skills gaps are huge. We need to anticipate more and react less. Accept the long game and be patient with partners. Invest in existing enterprises solving youth unemployment. Restructure financing towards more projects ready for scale. Promote work-based learning led by the private sector and in partnership with all levels of society. I like how diverse they are. Design more effective collaboration and reflection mechanisms with practical ideas from different perspectives. Strengthen evidence-based policies. Focus on finding out what works and using that to influence reform of old systems. Responsible collective leadership from bottom up and up bottom. Matching education for private sector needs. Increase bilateral government dialogue on policy, specifically for youth work livelihoods. Support entrepreneurial solutions. This is coming back. Establish powerful networks and platforms to promote decent jobs for youth. Formaliser le partenariat public-privé au niveau politique.
Encourage public-private partnership from a political viewpoint.
Also. Map partnerships and discover new collaboration opportunities with the continent. Partner more with the youth already making impact in this area. Investing in local entrepreneurship through entrepreneurship competitions and fellowship. This is also recurring. Are we done, Fabio? Lots of ideas. You can also, yes, congrats, thank you. If you go to slido.com with that hashtag, you can still go and see these results if you're interested. But now I would like to hear some comments on what you've just heard. Is there anything that you think is useful? Uki?
Thank you very much. I think when I was coming for this conference, there was one major thing I felt if I didn't communicate, then I would have failed. So this is my chance, which is to say that as we have heard from the stories by the people that shared today, one message I thought was important is for us to know that large-scale job creation is possible. And I know that there have been maybe failures or people, maybe you tried, I'm speaking now to those especially investing in the continent from outside the continent. Maybe you tried one or two things and maybe the people disappointed you, but I want you to kind of get a new perspective that young people in Africa who had no support have actually been designing solutions and implementing, like really doing the grunt work, okay? And these solutions they have discovered are working. If you can invest more in finding these people, then large-scale job creation is possible. So for somebody like me, people ask me a lot, how come Edo State has created so many jobs in a short time? And I just tell them the secret is that I'm not the one actually creating the jobs. Based on the fact that I was on the other side of the divide just about 2 years ago, and I was creating jobs through my own social initiatives, I just work and discover people. Imagine having 10 Solomons, 10 Walas, 50 Wales that you're supporting. Their initiatives are creating thousands of jobs. So you can very quickly expand your work if you invest more in finding people already doing the great work. Thank you.
I wanted to pass a comment the other time, but the time was up. So I just want to pass the comment. She asked a question the other time about agriculture, how it's a future for Africa. So it's key to note that agric is not the future. Like people say, agric is the future. Do you wait for the future to eat? You eat every day. So why do you call it the future when you don't wait for the future to eat? We have eaten how many times today? We've gone for coffee how many times today? We could have said that we eat for the future, but agric is now.
Past, present, and future.
It's now. So it has to be treated with urgency. It has to be. I have read about the figures of how agric created jobs on the continent many decades ago. So we need to begin to sell the positive narration of young people who have succeeded in agriculture. We need to make agriculture sexy. We need to begin to show young people, instead of showing the old women in the farm, instead of showing those wearing dirty clothes in the farm, we need to show the farmers in suit. We need to show the women in agri-tech who are wearing nice jeans, nice t-shirts, instead of showing the women in the village on the water side. And we need to sell the good part of agriculture. And like everyone have emphasized, that you need to engage stakeholders, people who are successful in that line. And I want to emphasize again, for other development partners to emulate, ILO is changing the model and is working on the continent. I'm one of the young people ILO is engaging on the continent. I know another lady from Zimbabwe who's also been engaged. With this, we are able to achieve a lot of things. Aside from being here, of course, I've been holding side meetings with ILO officials here because they are really keen about all the development organizations should emulate this model. You work with the government. Over the years, what we have seen is development organizations working with government on the continent. It won't create results because in Africa, you have youth minister who is 60 years, 70 years. You can't even talk to him as a young person. He doesn't even understand your challenge as a young person. So if you give such a youth ministry fund for youth development or for youth employment, they don't understand the reality of youth. So you have to change the model of working with government, begin to identify key stakeholders on the continent who you can work with directly. If I begin to talk about the amazing initiative where we're working together with ILO across the continent, not in Nigeria alone. We just discussed one in Malawi, coming up in Malawi in Cassava. So these are amazing projects that you can't even achieve with government. We have one in Zambia. So these are amazing projects that you can't achieve very quickly with government. And the issue of unemployment in Africa, it's a tickling time bomb. Mm-hmm. If we are not very fast about it, if we are not we need to be fast and desperate about it. Otherwise, you see what is happening in some parts: terrorism, violence everywhere, unrest. It's because they are not engaged. If they are engaged, they won't be doing all that. Thank you.
Let's be fast and desperate.
Merci. Thank you. We spent that whole day talking about opportunities for Africa. I think time has come to plead for Africa faced by the two organizations, SDC and the ILO. The ILO is the only tripartite organization, trade unions, employers and governments that manage the labor world. This institution has a whole consensual management system which doesn't exist elsewhere. So this consensus method of negotiation and discussion should be part and parcel of the ILO's strategy to get the countries to accept this paradigm change so as to go for a win-win solution. States, the employers, and trade unions are the key parties to employment in Africa. Trade unions are there to protect employees. Employers create prosperity, and the state oversees the whole scheme. So there needs to be consensus, and the ILO should develop policies along those lines. As far as SDC is concerned, the Swiss dual educational system, vocational training and education, is part of the Sustainable Development Goals. Number 4, this is what Switzerland is about. So young Swiss citizens and residents find their way, they find a decent job, and we have the lowest youth unemployment figures in the world. So these are win-win solutions. So if we're asked what we do for young people in Africa, I plead their cause at the SDC, a tripartite system, consensual but democratic system which enables people to say their piece, because if there's no policy along those lines, people are not going to do anything. So if the state could give up a bit of its sovereignty to these two stakeholders, we could in fact do something. So I'd ask SDC and ILO to do their bit to try and implement this dual system to find jobs for young people in Africa. Thank you for this short piece of advocacy, which is very pithy.
Voila.
Hi. Since a couple of years, I've been seeing international agencies, international development agencies, French development agency, and all of this big structure managing big amounts of money, big amounts for us of money. But we keeping each other, we keep discussing, we keep taking nice pictures, tweeting and talking, and it's very important. But the question when it comes to concrete actions, what can we do together? We face the fact that there are no tools with these international organizations or development agencies to have concrete actions with entrepreneurs or social entrepreneurs like us. So how can this change on your level? How can you create channels and tools? We were talking about fellowships, we were talking about competitions. How can you really find the guys who are really changing things on the ground and invest in them through the, I don't know, sponsorship, grants, investment, impact investment, whatever, but help them, or because they are helping you at the end to solve problems and take the created solution, the implemented solutions to the next level, especially when we talk about a problem that is reaching 125 million young people in the continent. Thank you.
I'll take this as a last comment.
Okay, hello everyone, and now we are at the end of this very interesting day of discussions, conversations, and I'm sorry I was not able to attend all of them. I did attend some of it, and I was quite pleased by the richness of the conversations. I also think that there have been some concrete takeaways. We have discussed about the current situation, the trends in youth employment, the challenges. We have also had some solutions discussed. We have heard from young people from the continent. We have also heard about the importance of knowledge development, the importance of partnerships. And altogether, I think if there's one big underlying message, we need to all come together, because the challenge of youth unemployment and youth employment in Africa is a huge one. Going purely by demographic trends, the labor supply in Africa by 2040 is going to, the African continent is going to be the size of the labor force today in China and India combined. So you can imagine the huge challenge and the need to create jobs for all these young people. And of course, the Global Commission's report, I'm sure all of you have heard about the report of the Global Commission of the Future of Work, which was launched on the 22nd of January, speaks about these challenges, speaks about the world of work going forward, and the need to invest in people, the need to invest in institutions, and the need to invest in decent work. And I also want to say that from the ILO's perspective, what is extremely important is that we have an integrated strategy, one that looks at both the demand side, job creation, macro policies, labor market policies, entrepreneurship, etc., but also the supply side, skills, education, TVET systems, and the matching of young people with jobs. This morning, our DDG spoke about partnerships. She mentioned the Global Initiative on Decent Jobs for Youth. And I also take this opportunity to invite the SDC to think about what they can do with the Global Initiative. It's a very rich platform. We have 50 partners. And the main intention is really that we come together to scale action to tackle the youth unemployment problem. Because for years, all of us, as was mentioned recently, have been talking about youth employment, the challenges, and that we need to come together. But the focus has been there, but the interventions have been fragmented, and therefore we have not been able to make impact. I also take this opportunity to thank SDC and our partners. And for the centenary year, this year, we are holding a major global youth employment forum. And we have decided to hold it in Africa because that's where the challenge is the biggest, because it's also our focus. And the government of Nigeria has very kindly agreed to host it. So it will be in Abuja, the week of 12th, 13th of August, which is the week of the International Youth Day. And we'll be very pleased. We'll send you the formal invitations, but all of you will see how we can reach you. But it will be great to have you for this global conference. And for SDC, I also wanted to mention that the Global Initiative on Decent Jobs for Youth has its annual event this year. And the government of Spain has kindly agreed to host it. So it will be in Madrid, 8th and 9th of May. We'll send you an invitation. And the focus of that will be on decent work for youth, but specifically on rights and voices, because that's a very important part of this whole story. So my thanks finally to SDC for enabling us to have this discussion today. It's been very rich, very useful. And to all my colleagues, both from the ILO and the SDC, who have worked very hard to make this possible, to all the colleagues here, to the participants, and to those who helped us with the logistics, the interpreters who were excellent and very patient all through. So thanks to everyone. And we look forward to working on this together. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Dasgupta. And I'd like to also add a few words of my thoughts. Now, you've already seen a lot of conclusions that were drawn from the World Café just now, very rich. I'm going to add some of them you're going to see are overlapping or even the same. I mean, I actually participated in some of those tables, so some of the ideas are the same. Also because I was inspired by some of the things, by many of the things that you all said. Firstly, and you felt it in the question I asked earlier on, I asked myself, okay, this is all good, this is all very inspiring, but in the end, what is that a governmental agency should be doing in all this context? What is our role? And so there I have to pick on some of the recommendations and some of the ideas that came out throughout this day. Namely, we can't back away from policy coherence and policy dialogue. If, as a government organization, we don't get into the trenches and discuss policy coherence about trade, policy coherence about enabling an environment that allows for industrialization. We were reminded by Gilles at the end that there is an SDG 9. We forget it. Sometimes ILO is all about SDG 8, but there is an SDG 9 about sustainable industrialization. And Africa also has a right, sometimes in post-industrial Europe, just like we said agriculture was bad, huh, Peter? we tend to say, oh, industrialization is bad. But wait a minute. I mean, there are markets, there are consumers, and there is a need for a sustainable industrialization as well in Africa. And so being part of the dialogue that enables the policy environment for that is a responsibility for a government and for a governmental agency. Another important one is labor migration. It came in a number of the speeches this morning. I think we need a new narrative about labor migration. And I'm so glad because I know that ILO is one of the strong promoters of this new narrative. Marketplaces this morning were actually concrete ideas how to transform education, how to make sure that it's not just about reading and writing and mathematics, but also about making sure that young people get connected with the world of work, and that is SDG 4 in a very holistic, lifelong learning kind of way. I think we have an important role to play in that. We are strong investors in the Global Partnership on Education. We need to have a responsibility to use that leverage to make sure that education investment in Africa has that additional perspective that we were reminded by Aflatun and by other examples that we saw today. So invest in knowledge and make sure that education is really connected with the world of work. Then I also am leaving this meeting with a number of quality criteria that I want to apply when I look at project proposals, at programs, when I visit countries, where I want to ask myself, are we walking the talk to really deliver on this expectation, on this promise to create jobs in Africa? There were messages, and let me start by what we usually mention last, and that is to be explicit on gender in our program. This is a number one test. It's not the last, it's actually the number one test. I think it's Marie-Louise who said it again. We need to make sure that we are explicit about what's going to happen with gender equality in our projects, in our programs. A second one, avoid this push supply side and make sure that our programs are properly connected with the real economy. Overcome the silos. I mean, one silo that is sometimes here in these kind of discussions is the vocational training and education silo, but it goes much further than that. We were reminded today that there are no jobs on a dead planet. So actually, we have to overcome a lot of other silos if we want to make sure that we move forward. Then the importance of identifying and enabling local initiatives without standing in their way. And we heard it again just now in the wrap-up. I think that there are some important instruments that we're already using. I think we can do more of that. I think we're now, we're already providing scholarships and like little prizes and things. But I think the next step is actually finding investment vehicles that actually providing support to entrepreneurs, impact entrepreneurs. And so I think that's the next step that we need to go. The other one that is very important and something specific for us as governmental agency is we need to work with local governments and make sure that they go the next in terms of digitalization. We were talking with Wala just now, and she was telling me, so what can you do with us? What can SDC do with her? I said, well, let's see. Maybe we can work with the provincial authorities and see how that missing link between an administration that is often dusty and very paper-based and very intellectual, and the people and the informal economy, where that missing mile, you know, has to be covered often with digitalization. And who better to do it than actual entrepreneurs that have experienced, that have been there, that have done it, rather than some academic solution. Finally, I think that I'm leaving this meeting with a very strong sense of community of practice. What do I mean by community of practice? Not necessarily another institution, I'm a member of another community of practice, but a sense that actually we all are part of a group of many. There is already a solution out there, most probably for the problem that you are facing and that I'm facing. And the whole thing is to get to know these people. And then finding that part of the job that only you and only your institution can do, and then actually really do it full out. So those are some of the conclusions that I'm leaving this place with. And really, thank you all for very, very inspiring, dialogue throughout this day. I can't stop without actually calling a few names and institutions, because there are some people that have actually invested a lot of time, a lot of work to make sure that this meeting could happen today. Firstly, I want to thank the Jacobs Foundation for their partnership and for their co-sponsoring. Oh, there they are. Thank you very much. Of course, thank you, ILO, for your partnership, and congratulations on your 100 years. I mean, wow. Is that something special? And then to all those who have joined us on Livestream, you guys are great. Thank you. Then to all the experts and speakers who prepared their speeches and who were so inspiring and so dynamic. You held the marketplace, etc. You brought the substance into this room. Thank you so much to all of you. I think you deserve a great round of applause. Then we had our e-facilitation team, Selena and Cesar. Thank you. And I know maybe there's some other people, also the technical team there. Thank you so much. The interpreters, I don't know whether they're still in the room, but thank you very much for what you've done to help us to talk today and to get together, to exchange our experiences. Our moderator was now hiding right at the back there, both of them. I think they were our moderators. And then last but not least, the ILO and SDC team that pulled all this together. Thank you so much, Maria, Carmen, all your teams. Yeah, I think that's the end of my list. Thank you so much.
I think it's time to say goodbye from us. Bye. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for holding on to so long and contributing so live. It was a pleasure engaging with you. And don't forget about the website. I've posted times where you can find all the presentations and the recorded streaming as well. Also get an email with all the resources as a follow-up. So do enjoy your evening and bye.